TapcoSlate 5-way Victorian Conservatory Ridge to Hip Junction. The Victorian Conservatory, or 5-way ridge to hip junction point, is probably the most complicated joint to achieve and needs to be manually created using TapcoSlate classic ridge and hip caps. Here we have a simplified Victorian roof. Fit roofing membrane. Fit TapcoSlate classic. Place the first hip caps into place onto the end of the hips for marking out and cutting the hip end caps. Move the hip end cap down the hip until the cap completely covers the end of the hip in line with the edges of both tile angles. Mark the line where both angles intercede. Score the line 3 or 4 times with a sharp utility knife. Then bend and snap along the lines to create an angled hip end cap. The cut edges can then be notched with the utility blade to resemble the riven edge finish if needed. Fix into place using 50mm roofing nails or outdoor screws. Overlay the next set of hip caps to the 6-inch exposure marks on top of the hip end cap. Continue fixing hip caps into place up the hip until you reach the midpoint. It's good practice to construct and fit a lead or lead substitute saddle at this point to make the ridge to hip joint watertight. Measure the bottom edge of the roof planes that need to intersect and mark the center points. String a line between the center marks of the roof planes and the ridge hip apex. Overlay the next set of hip caps from the midpoint to the ridge loosely without fixing. Complete one hip at a time so that cuts can be adjusted row by row. Mark and cut the hip caps using the line intersections as a guide, and then fix the hip caps into place securely. Repeat this for all hips. Use a butyl-based sealant to seal any joints. Place the first ridge cap over the ridge to hip junction to cover all of the cuts that have been made. Fix in place with 2 fixings. Lay the rest of the ridge caps overlaying one another using the exposure gauge at the same gauge as the slates, maximum 7.5 inches. At the end of the ridge, trim the excess off the last ridge cap to fit into place against the wall. Always fix into place with 2 fixings per cap. Trim the riven side of a standard ridge cap to size to cover the last cap's fixings. Fix this piece in place using black pins. You can also use standard nails or screws, covering the tops with bitumen to seal, or capped fixings. Lead flashing should insert into the brick courses and lay over the top of the slates and last ridge cap to create a safe water runoff. The last item to address for this build is the gap created at the front ridge cap to finish off and to keep debris and insects out of the ridge to hip junction. Make a paper or card template shaped to the size of the gap. Cut out the template. Transfer onto a full TapcoSlate and cut out with a jigsaw. Glue the cut piece of TapcoSlate into place using an adhesive made to fix polypropylene. We recommend the use of Permabond TA4610 or Permabond TA4620. Note that strips of TapcoSlate can be glued inside the ridge cap beforehand to strengthen the fixture if required. Use a butyl-based sealant to seal the joints if needed.